Karate Kid,
Yes.
which turned out to be absolutely fantastic
Yeah, it
for
certainly
you.
did. I quite didn't know it was going to work out that well.
Made you a household word
Well,
if you weren't before.
For nearly 40 years, fans have quoted the lines, mimicked the crane kick, and debated the tournament. They've watched Daniel LaRusso's journey countless times, memorizing every scene, but according to Ralph Macchio himself, even devoted fans missed something fundamental hiding in plain sight. In interviews promoting his memoir, the actor finally revealed secrets that transform everything audiences thought they understood, a message so profound it kept the Karate Kid alive for 4 decades. What could this be? This is what you never figured out.
Breathe in, breathe out, wax on, wax off. Wax on, wax off.
The movie was never about karate. It was about belonging. Behind the tournament brackets and training montages of Karate Kid lived a story about displacement and desperation for connection. Daniel LaRusso arrived in Reseda, California, as an outsider in every sense that mattered. Transplanted from the familiar streets of Newark, New Jersey, he found himself navigating an alien landscape where everything felt wrong. The sun blazed too bright. The apartment complex felt sterile and temporary. The teenagers spoke a different social language, one he had not learned and could not fake. Macchio understood this isolation intimately, channeling it into every awkward interaction and defensive posture that defined Daniel's early scenes. Director John G. Avildsen, fresh from his triumph with Rocky, recognized something essential about underdog narratives that most filmmakers missed. The real battles never happened in rings or on tournament floors. They unfolded in quiet moments of self-doubt, in the grinding weight of loneliness, in the desperate need to matter to someone, anyone. Avildsen pulled Macchio aside before filming began and shared a truth that would shape every decision the young actor made. This film's true fight was emotional, not physical. Daniel's opponents were not the blonde bullies from Cobra Kai. His real enemy was the crushing sensation of being invisible, of being unwanted, of being perpetually outside looking in. This revelation transformed how Macchio approached the role. Every scene became an opportunity to showcase a teenager struggling against forces he could not punch or kick away. When Daniel tried impressing Ali at the beach party, audiences watched someone reaching desperately for acceptance, only to have it yanked away through humiliation. When he endured beatings from Johnny Lawrence and his crew, the pain went beyond bruises and blood. Each attack reinforced Daniel's worst fear, that he would never belong, that Reseda would never feel like home, that he was fundamentally inadequate for this new California life. Enter Mr. Miyagi, the handyman who became everything Daniel's world lacked. Pat Morita's performance created more than a teacher or mentor. He embodied the father figure Daniel needed but never explicitly asked for. Their relationship developed through patience and unspoken understanding, through small acts of protection and quiet lessons about honor. Miyagi saw Daniel's loneliness because he carried his own. He recognized the boy's desperate hunger for guidance because he understood what it meant to navigate life as an outsider. Their connection transcended karate entirely. The training became a vehicle for something deeper, the transmission of wisdom from someone who had survived loss and displacement. To someone just beginning to understand those burdens, Avildsen crafted their dynamic with remarkable subtlety. No sweeping speeches announced their bond. No dramatic music swelled to signal emotional breakthroughs. Instead, their relationship grew through accumulation, through Miyagi's decision to attend the tournament, through his willingness to share sake and painful memories, through the simple act of showing up when Daniel needed him most. Audiences responded because they recognized this pattern from their own lives. They remembered teachers who believed in them, neighbors who offered unexpected kindness, strangers who became family through circumstance and choice. Macchio revealed that this emotional foundation explained why viewers cried during the final tournament. The crane kick victory represented more than defeating a bully or winning a trophy. That moment crystallized Daniel's transformation from displaced outsider to someone who belonged, someone who mattered, someone who had found his place. The tears came because audiences understood the journey's true stakes. They had felt that same loneliness, that same desperate need for acceptance, that same relief when someone finally saw them and chose to care. The film's genius lay in disguising this profound meditation on belonging within the framework of a sports movie. Viewers arrived expecting martial arts action and left carrying something weightier. They discovered that strength emerged not from dominating others, but from finding the courage to be vulnerable, to trust, to accept help from unexpected sources. Daniel's fight was never really against Cobra Kai. His true battle was learning that being an outsider did not mean being alone, that displacement could lead to discovery, and some skills could be learned from simple habits, like the next hidden message. The famous wax-on, wax-off scene had a hidden message. The moment has been parodied countless times, referenced in everything from sitcoms to Super Bowl commercials, reduced to cultural shorthand for unconventional teaching methods. Yet beneath the surface of those circular hand motions and frustrated groans lived a masterclass in cinematic storytelling that most viewers never fully comprehended. Ralph Macchio peeled back the layers of this iconic sequence, revealing that its power came not from comedy or cleverness, but from a carefully orchestrated psychological journey that made audiences question everything they thought they understood about learning itself. Pat Morita and John G. Avildsen spent hours discussing how to visually represent the concept of hidden knowledge. They wanted to capture something essential about mentorship, that true teachers often disguise their most important lessons, forcing students to discover wisdom through experience rather than explanation. The wax-on, wax-off methodology emerged from this philosophy. Miyagi would embed karate fundamentals into seemingly menial tasks, transforming Daniel's skepticism into the audience's skepticism, making everyone complicit in doubting the old man's methods. The scene's construction was deliberate torture, both for Daniel and for viewers. Macchio spent days filming repetitive motions, capturing genuine physical exhaustion and mounting frustration. His arms ached. His back protested. The monotony ground against him exactly as Avildsen intended. The director wanted authentic weariness radiating from every frame, wanted audiences to feel Daniel's confusion transforming into resentment. No music accompanied these sequences initially, just the sound of cloth against metal, wood against wood, the rhythmic breathing of someone questioning whether they had made a catastrophic mistake. Trusting this strange little man, Avildsen's editing strategy amplified the discomfort. He stretched the training montage longer than conventional wisdom suggested, letting it breathe past the point of entertainment into something approaching tedium. Test audiences shifted in their seats. Studio executives worried the pacing would lose viewers. But Avildsen understood something crucial. He needed the audience as frustrated as Daniel for the revelation to land with proper impact. The scene was never about showing training. It was about creating shared experience between character and viewer, manufacturing identical emotional states so that when understanding finally arrived, it would strike everyone simultaneously. Macchio recalled the moment when the scene's true purpose crystallized for him during filming. The sequence where Miyagi finally demonstrates how the seemingly pointless movements actually formed defensive blocks was shot in a single afternoon, but its preparation consumed weeks. Morita practiced the reveal until every gesture flowed with absolute precision. When he grabbed Daniel's wrists and guided them through blocking motions, showing how wax-on became an upward block, how wax-off transformed into a deflection, Macchio allowed genuine surprise to flood his face. The realization was not manufactured for cameras. In that instant, he understood what Avildsen and Morita had been constructing all along. The scene's deeper message operated on multiple levels that only revealed themselves through reflection. On the surface, it taught that mastery required patience and repetition, that excellence emerged from fundamentals practiced until they became instinct. But Macchio emphasized the subtler lesson embedded within: trust. Daniel had to surrender his ego, his preconceptions about what learning should look like, his teenage certainty that he knew better than his elder. The wax-on, wax-off sequence forced him to take a leap of faith, to continue even when logic screamed that he was wasting precious time, to believe that someone who barely knew him might actually have his best interests at heart. This represented Daniel's first spiritual victory, as Macchio described it. Not his first physical triumph or his first successful technique, but his first moment of genuine growth beyond himself. He learned that wisdom often appeared in unexpected packages, that the most valuable lessons rarely announced themselves with fanfare, that sometimes the greatest strength was admitting you needed guidance. Audiences shared this epiphany because Avildsen had manipulated them into Daniel's exact headspace. They had doubted Miyagi. They had questioned the training. When the reveal came, they experienced the same rush of understanding, the same embarrassed realization that they had underestimated quiet handyman who saw things they could not. The scene worked because it trusted viewers to feel rather than simply observe, to journey alongside Daniel through confusion toward enlightenment. Decades later, it remains a masterpiece of visual storytelling dressed as a simple training montage. But this carefully crafted moment almost never made it to audiences. The film's ending underwent dramatic changes that would have altered everything fans remember about the tournament, the crane kick, and whether Daniel LaRusso deserved his ultimate victory. At all, Daniel wasn't supposed to win the tournament. At first, the crane kick stands frozen in cultural memory. Daniel LaRusso balanced impossibly on one leg, arms spread like wings, before delivering the strike that would define a generation's understanding of triumph. Yet this iconic moment, the image that adorned 1 million posters and inspired countless playground reenactments, nearly never existed. Ralph Macchio's revelation about the original screenplay sent shockwaves through the fan community. In early drafts, Daniel LaRusso lost the All-Valley Karate Tournament. The film audiences know the ending that made them cheer and cry simultaneously represented a fundamental reimagining of what the story meant and who deserved victory. The original concept followed a different philosophical path entirely. Screenwriter Robert Mark Kamen envisioned a narrative where Daniel's transformation mattered more than any trophy. The tournament would serve as backdrop, not climax. Daniel would fight valiantly, would apply everything Miyagi taught him, would discover courage he never knew existed within himself, but Johnny Lawrence would still defeat him in the final match. The lesson would be that personal growth transcended competition, that becoming a better human outweighed any external validation, that sometimes the real victory was simply showing up and refusing to quit. This approach aligned with certain martial arts philosophies that emphasized internal development over external achievement. Kamen drew inspiration from Eastern traditions, suggesting that the journey itself held more value than any destination, that character building mattered infinitely more than scoreboards or rankings. Daniel would leave the tournament defeated in technical terms, but victorious in every way that actually mattered. He would have faced his fears, earned respect, found family in Miyagi, and proven something essential to himself. The trophy would go to Johnny, but the spiritual triumph would belong entirely to Daniel. Test screenings revealed a different truth. Audiences who had invested 2 hours in this underdog's struggle demanded satisfaction that went beyond moral victories. They had watched Daniel endure relentless bullying, witnessed his isolation and suffering, shared his training and frustration. Macchio recalled studio executives huddling in panicked conference calls after preview audiences expressed disappointment with the original ending. Comments cards used words like unsatisfying, incomplete, devastating. Viewers understood the thematic intention, but rejected it emotionally. They needed Daniel to win, not for shallow reasons, but because the narrative had earned that moment of complete triumph. The filmmakers faced a critical decision that would determine whether their movie became a footnote or a phenomenon. John G. Avildsen, drawing from his experience with Rocky, understood audience expectations around underdog narratives. Rocky Balboa could lose to Apollo Creed and still win our hearts because that film established different parameters from its opening frames. The Karate Kid had set up different stakes, created different investments. Daniel's victory needed to be total because his suffering had been total, his displacement complete, his need for validation absolute. The crane kick emerged from this creative crisis. Avildsen and Kamen reconvened to craft a finale that would satisfy emotional requirements while maintaining thematic integrity. They needed something visually spectacular, something that justified Daniel's victory without undermining Johnny's skill or Cobra Kai's legitimate prowess. The solution was a technique so unexpected, so perfectly executed, that it transcended normal competitive dynamics. The crane kick would not simply defeat Johnny Lawrence, it would represent the culmination of everything Daniel had learned, a physical manifestation of patience, balance, courage, and trust. Filming the new ending required additional production time and budget. Macchio and the crew returned to shoot the tournament's final moments, understanding they were capturing something beyond a simple fight scene. The crane kick needed to feel both impossible and inevitable, shocking yet earned. Avildsen filmed multiple angles, capturing the moment from every conceivable perspective. He wanted audiences to see the technique's beauty, its precision, the way it embodied everything Miyagi had taught, without looking anything like the training they had witnessed. The revised ending transformed the film's entire meaning. Daniel's victory became more than personal achievement. It validated Miyagi's methods, proved that honor and discipline could defeat aggression and cruelty, demonstrated that outsiders could not just survive but thrive. Audiences left theaters energized rather than contemplative, carrying a message of hope instead of resignation. The change made The Karate Kid a phenomenon instead of a respected drama. Yet the victory's sweetness carried weight that audiences never recognized in the moment. Behind Daniel's triumph lived a performance infused with genuine emotion that Pat Morita drew from places darker and more personal than anyone realized, connecting the character's fictional struggles to historical trauma that still haunted an entire generation. Mr. Miyagi's tears were real. The drunk scene arrived without warning, shattering the film's comfortable rhythm with raw anguish that felt utterly foreign to everything preceding it. Audiences who had been smiling at Miyagi's patient wisdom and quirky teaching methods suddenly found themselves confronting something darker, something achingly human that transcended the boundaries of a feel-good sports movie. Pat Morita, hunched over photographs and sake bottles, delivered a performance so devastating that it earned him an Oscar nomination and elevated The Karate Kid into territory few similar films ever reached. Ralph Macchio's revelation about that scene's authenticity added profound context to what many consider the emotional centerpiece of the entire franchise. Those tears streaming down Miyagi's weathered face were not manufactured for cameras. They were real. Morita carried pain that few colleagues understood or even suspected existed beneath his comedic exterior. Born Noriyuki Morita in 1932, he spent formative years imprisoned in American concentration camps designed to contain Japanese Americans during World War II. His family was torn from their California home, stripped of possessions and dignity, confined behind barbed wire for the crime of ancestry. Morita rarely discussed these experiences publicly, maintaining the professional cheerfulness expected of a character actor known primarily for comedy. But the trauma lived within him, dormant but never truly healed, waiting for moments when it could surface and speak its truth. The scene where Daniel discovers Miyagi drunk on the anniversary of his wife and son's death became that moment Avildsen and Morita approached it with unusual reverence, understanding they were creating something delicate and potentially powerful. They discussed backstory that would never appear in the script, building Miyagi's history of loss and survival, connecting the character's gentle wisdom to wounds that never fully closed. Morita revealed aspects of his own past, drawing parallels between Miyagi's wartime experiences and his own family's internment. The way history crushed innocent people beneath forces they could neither control nor comprehend. Macchio recalled the atmosphere on set that night as unlike anything else during production. The crew worked in near silence, speaking only when absolutely necessary, moving with careful deliberation to avoid disrupting the emotional space Morita was constructing. Avildsen cleared the set of non-essential personnel, creating intimacy that allowed vulnerability without audience. The director understood that what Morita was preparing to do required safety and trust, that the actor was about to access places within himself that rarely saw daylight. The filming happened in a single take. Morita sat surrounded by photographs and military memorabilia, representing everything Miyagi had lost, everything the war had stolen from him. The sake flowed freely as the character descended into grief. When Daniel entered and tried to help, when Miyagi pushed him away before collapsing into sobs, Morita was not performing. He was releasing decades of accumulated pain, channeling his family's suffering, giving voice to losses that America had never properly acknowledged or apologized for. The tears came from a place beyond technique or craft. They emerged from genuine anguish that connected personal history to fictional character in ways that made the boundaries between actor and role completely disappear. Macchio remembered feeling like an intruder, watching something too private and profound for cameras. His own responses in the scene carried authentic uncertainty about how to navigate another person's breakdown. He was not Daniel comforting Miyagi. He was a young actor witnessing a man excavating his own buried trauma, unsure whether to stay or leave, wanting to help, but recognizing that some pain transcended comfort. The scene's power came from this authenticity, from the collision between scripted narrative and genuine human suffering. When Avildsen called cut, silence hung over the set for several long moments. Crew members wiped their own eyes. Morita sat motionless, returning slowly from wherever he had gone to find those tears. Nobody spoke about what had just happened, but everyone understood they had witnessed something rare and precious. A moment when cinema captured actual human truth, rather than its approximation. The scene would require no additional takes, no coverage, no alternative angles. What existed in that single recording was perfect and complete. Too authentic to improve through repetition. The moment resonated through decades because audiences sensed its genuineness even without understanding its source. They felt the weight of real grief, recognized suffering that transcended fiction. Morita's performance connected viewers to historical trauma, while grounding the Karate Kid's themes in genuine human experience. Yet this emotional authenticity existed within a film that would eventually spark intense debate about its own narrative morality, inspiring a theory that would flip everything audiences thought they understood about heroes and villains entirely on its head. The Cobra Kai theory still makes Ralph laugh. Decades after the credits rolled, the internet decided to put Daniel LaRusso on trial. A theory emerged from the depths of online forums and YouTube video essays, spreading with viral intensity until it became impossible to ignore. What if Daniel was actually the villain? What if the movie had manipulated audiences into rooting for the wrong character? What if Johnny Lawrence, the blonde antagonist in the skeleton costume, was the real victim of the story? The reinterpretation gained such momentum that it eventually inspired Cobra Kai, the sequel series that explored the tournament's aftermath through Johnny's eyes. Ralph Macchio found himself defending his character against accusations that would have seemed absurd in 1984, but had somehow become legitimate talking points in the 21st century. The theory's proponents built their case with lawyerly precision. They pointed out that Daniel arrived in town and immediately pursued Johnny's ex-girlfriend, inserting himself into a complicated romantic situation without understanding its history or context. They noted that Daniel initiated several confrontations, including the infamous moment where he sprayed water on Johnny in the bathroom, escalating tensions that might have otherwise diffused naturally. They argued that Daniel's actions at the Halloween dance constituted assault, that his crane kick to Johnny's injured knee was unnecessarily brutal, that Mr. Miyagi's intimidation tactics against teenagers crossed ethical lines. Viewed through this revisionist lens, Daniel became an entitled outsider who disrupted an established community and claimed victimhood when facing consequences. Macchio admitted that the theory fascinated him, representing a cultural shift in how audiences engaged with narrative. The internet had created space for alternative interpretations, for questioning assumed heroes and reconsidering dismissed villains. He appreciated the intellectual exercise, the way people deconstructed scenes and debated motivations with genuine passion. But he firmly rejected the core premise, insisting that context and intention mattered more than isolated incidents cherry-picked to support contrarian arguments. Daniel never went looking for trouble, Macchio emphasized. Trouble found him repeatedly and violently in ways that left him few options beyond fighting back or accepting permanent victim status. The film's actual narrative painted a different picture than the theory suggested. Johnny and his Cobra Kai friends initiated nearly every physical confrontation. They attacked Daniel at the beach, assaulted him at the arcade, chased him through the neighborhood on dirt bikes, beat him bloody at the Halloween dance Daniel's water prank. While immature, paled in comparison to sustained campaigns of intimidation and violence. His pursuit of Ali happened after she had clearly ended things with Johnny, not during an active relationship. The crane kick came during a legitimate tournament match, where both participants had accepted the risks of competition. Miyagi never harmed the teenagers, merely frightened them enough to reconsider their actions, employing minimum force necessary to protect Daniel from serious injury. Yet Macchio conceded that the blurred lines between bully and victim gave the Karate Kid its lasting complexity. Daniel made mistakes. He could be arrogant and impulsive. His adolescent decision-making sometimes created problems rather than solving them. Johnny was not purely evil, just a teenager corrupted by a toxic teacher who encouraged cruelty as strength. The film worked because it presented complicated people in difficult situations, not cartoons. Representing absolute good and evil, this ambiguity allowed the Cobra Kai series to flourish decades later, exploring how trauma and choices ripple through lives, how yesterday's villains might become today's heroes through growth and reflection. The theory's popularity revealed something interesting about modern audiences. They craved complexity, questioned simple narratives, resisted being told who to root for without examining evidence themselves. Macchio respected this skepticism even while disagreeing with its conclusions regarding Daniel's character. The debates kept the Karate Kid relevant, introduced new generations to the story, proved that the film contained enough depth to support multiple interpretations. Whether viewers saw Daniel as hero or villain, they were engaging with themes about belonging, violence, mentorship, and adolescent identity that transcended any single reading. Macchio noted that the revisionist theory overlooked the film's most important element, what it continued teaching audiences 40 years after release. The debates about who bullied whom missed the deeper message about resilience, growth, and finding your place in hostile environments. People kept returning to The Karate Kid not because it perfectly depicted moral clarity, but because it captured something true about the struggle to become yourself, despite forces trying to break you down. That enduring relevance, that ability to speak across generations and spark passionate discussion, revealed why a modest 1984 film about a teenager learning karate had transformed into something approaching mythology. A story that refused to fade, even as the world around it changed beyond recognition. Why the movie still matters. The mathematics of cultural longevity rarely make sense. Hundreds of films released in 1984 vanished into obscurity, remembered only by film historians and nostalgic critics mining forgotten decades for hidden gems. Yet, The Karate Kid persisted, spreading across generations like a story told around campfires, each retelling introducing new audiences to Daniel LaRusso's journey from displaced outsider to unexpected champion. Ralph Macchio expressed genuine bewilderment at this phenomenon, this refusal of a modest underdog story to fade gracefully into the past. 4 decades removed from that summer release, the film continued sparking conversations, inspiring Halloween costumes, generating sequel series that dominated streaming platforms. Something within its DNA transcended temporal boundaries and connected with fundamental human experiences that never aged, regardless of changing fashions or evolving sensibilities. Macchio identified the key to this endurance in a simple observation that explained everything. People saw themselves in Daniel, not the specific circumstances of moving to California or learning karate or fighting in tournaments, but the emotional architecture underneath those plot points. Everyone had felt like an outsider at some point, experienced the desperate hunger for acceptance, struggled against forces that seemed insurmountable. Everyone had faced moments where quitting felt easier than persisting, where doubt whispered that they lacked whatever qualities success required. Daniel's journey mapped onto universal human experiences with such precision that viewers from wildly different backgrounds and eras found their own stories reflected in his struggles. The film's central message operated with deceptive simplicity. You can get knocked down, but you can get back up. This truth required no elaborate explanation or philosophical complexity. It spoke directly to something primal within human nature, the instinct to rise after falling, to continue despite pain, to refuse surrender even when defeat seemed inevitable. But The Karate Kid added a crucial element that elevated it beyond simple motivational platitudes. It insisted that getting back up required doing so with respect, with honor, with attention to how you treated others and yourself. Throughout the struggle, victory achieved through cruelty or dishonor was no victory at all. This moral framework gave the film weight that pure action or comedy could never provide. The relationship between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi formed the emotional core that kept audiences returning across decades. Their dynamic transcended typical mentor-student formulas, becoming something richer and more nuanced. Miyagi never lectured or pontificated. He taught through example, through patience, through quiet presence, that said more than speeches ever could. He saw Daniel not as a project or student, but as a young person worthy of investment and care. Their connection modeled relationships that many viewers wished they had experienced or hoped to create, showing how genuine mentorship transformed both teacher and student through mutual respect and vulnerability. Macchio emphasized that this mentorship element resonated particularly strongly with audiences lacking positive role models in their own lives. The film showed that family could be chosen rather than inherited, that guidance sometimes came from unexpected sources. Miyagi filled a void in Daniel's life, but their relationship also filled voids for countless viewers who saw in their bond what healthy mentorship looked like, how adults could shape young lives through attention and wisdom rather than control or judgment. The movie's themes about resilience gained new urgency as successive generations faced their own versions of displacement and struggle. Economic uncertainty, social upheaval, technological disruption, global crises that reshaped daily existence. Each era brought fresh challenges that made Daniel's journey feel newly relevant. The specifics changed, but the underlying experience remained constant. The feeling of being overwhelmed, of lacking tools to handle what life demanded, of needing someone to show you that you possessed more strength than you realized. The Karate Kid kept speaking to these experiences because it understood something essential about human vulnerability and the grace required to acknowledge that you need help. 4 decades later, The Karate Kid continued delivering that message to new audiences, discovering timeless truths dressed in 1980s nostalgia. The film's persistence testified to humanity's endless need for stories about resilience, mentorship, and the quiet miracles that happen when someone sees your potential and refuses to let you waste it. New viewers discovered the film through streaming platforms, through parents sharing childhood favorites with their own children, through cultural references embedded in shows like Cobra Kai that sent audiences back to the source material. Each discovery perpetuated the cycle, ensuring that Daniel's story continued, finding fresh eyes and hearts ready to receive its lessons about courage, belonging, and the quiet revolutions that happen when someone believes in you enough to demand your best self. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the